Welcome, everybody. This is going to be the Birdcast. We're going to start a new segment, try to make podcasts, do our usual stuff. We're going to talk about all kinds of different stuff that Phoenix and I know really, really well. Phoenix, did you want to say anything before we begin?
Nope.
No? Okay. So the first thing that I want to discuss with you people,
what do you mean, you friends, people?
My lovely friends. Let me rephrase everything that I just said. The first thing that we wanted to discuss is Star Trek, which Phoenix and I know forwards, backwards, in, out,
sideways.
Yeah.
Intimately, not intimately.
we engaged, then broke up, and then got married later on. And then divorced.
And then got back together again for a couple weeks, and then eventually couldn't stand each other, so we stabbed each other in the throat.
And now we're just kind of stuck together in the afterlife. But anyways, to where we need to be. So the first thing we wanted to discuss, a lot of people kind of misinterpret and misunderstand the movies, which is actually kind of a big thing for Phoenix and I.
Well, the originals especially. Yes,
especially the original. Like motion picture. Let's start from the beginning. Motion picture. So let me set you up.
I'm just going to sit here and keep coughing. I'm just going to sit over here in the corner and cough while he explains this.
Oh, yeah. That's a great way to do everything. So, motion picture was essentially Gene Roddenberry's response, I want to say, to Star Wars. I don't know if that's exactly correct, but in essence, the whole point behind motion picture was just to say, look, this is what we can do with CGI. Here you go. Because back then, CGI was still becoming a really big thing. Because you got to think, this is 79.
Yeah, it would have been in response to Star Wars then. Because Star Wars was 77.
Yeah, that's why I want to say it was response to Star Wars, because Star Wars came out 2 years before Star Trek motion picture. But, that being said, motion picture is, in all essence, a 2-hour version of the original series episode, The Changeling. Yes. The Changeling was about a probe that they found. They beamed aboard. It turned out it was an Earth probe that was launched with another probe. It crashed into that probe. It kind of cannibalized the other probe to repair itself. Both AIs were still alive, so they fused to create what is called Nomad. It was trying to find perfection, was what it was. It thought its job was to do. They had two totally other jobs. One was to find suitable planets to terramorph. The other was to learn all that was learnable.
Boy, does that sound familiar.
Oh, yeah. To just summarize that episode and get to the main point, Nomad was just basically a perverted version of the original thing. This is where motion picture comes in. Motion picture is about a thing called Voyager on its way to Earth.
Which is the Voyager probe sent out, I believe, in the 70s?
It's Voyager 6. It was Voyager 6 on its way back to Earth.
Aboard the progenitor.
Yes. Which is another thing that we want to touch on motion picture. But essentially, what it was a probe from Earth that was lost. Everybody, I think Voyager was actually a real thing.
Well, the Voyager probe is an actual thing. But did it was actually launched in the 70s.
Was Voyager 6 an actual thing?
Yes.
Okay, so that whole backstory was true.
Yeah, the backstory of Voyager was completely true.
Okay, so then yeah, that That's another reason why I like Star Trek, is because a lot of their stuff is based off of real stuff.
Yeah, the Voyager probes, like, they were sent out from Earth in different directions to go explore different parts of the galaxy. Like, one was sent out to go past Pluto, that kind of direction. The other one was sent north-ish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything's relative in space. But, like, one of them was sent out towards, Pluto. One of them was sent out directly above us. One was sent down directly below. One was sent...
And we lost contact with one of them, right? Or was it all of them?
Well, eventually we haven't really lost contact with them. It's just it takes so long for the messaging to come back that...
I could have swore they said they lost contact with...
Well, I think
very
recently, I want to say like maybe a couple years ago, they finally lost contact with Voyager 2.
Okay.
And that was just because it finally got so far outside of our solar system, we had nothing that could reach it anymore. And it couldn't send signals back.
Yeah, because our carrier waves aren't advanced enough. And plus, the carrier waves they were using were radio, and
for God's sakes, but like the probes were launched back in the 70s, so we don't even use the technology we have today. They're using elementary.
But the point being, eventually Voyager, because the whole thing is, Voyager was launched in the 70s. Star Trek motion picture takes place in the 23rd century, so it's about 200 years after Voyager was initially...
Because it had been the 20th century. This is the 23rd century. It's been 300 years.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, so 300 years. It has made a great travel.
Almost exactly 300 years, because I believe motion picture takes place like 2290 or so.
Yeah.
And Voyager was launched in 1970-ish. So it would have been like 320 years.
But that's the point. Voyager made a long journey. It comes back after having been recovered. Excuse me. After having been recovered by a more advanced race.
Assimilated.
Not necessarily assimilated. It was repaired after a lot of damage, like by meteors and all that kinds of stuff. Natural space phenomena.
Space sucks.
But its mission was to learn all that was learnable and report back. So what does it do when it gains sentient being?
It reports back.
It's going back to report. It's carrying out its duty. It says, look, I got to go back home and tell my creator all of these things that I've learned. That was the whole thing with motion picture. At the end, Captain Decker, I'm sorry, spoiler alert for those few that are listening to this that haven't seen motion picture.
Very few.
Or were smart enough to listen to their buddies to not watch it. Let's face it, motion picture is the worst of them all.
I don't know, Final Frontier is pretty bad.
Yeah, but I will still stick to my argument that Final Frontier was good until they left the planet.
Yeah.
Once they left the planet, that was when it was bad. That's when it slowly degraded into terribleness. But, point being, Captain Decker fused with Voyager, and they went back to where they were. This is what officially created the Borg, the most terrifying race in all of Star Trek universe. This is what created it.
We will probably get into more depth about the Borg on a later podcast, because that right there is a story in and of itself.
Yes, it is. That's a big thing in the lore. That's a major thing.
Speaking of, actually, for the Progenitor, which was the name of the Voyager ship that they were on, if you've ever played Star Trek Online, it's what the giant Unimatrix things look like.
I figured out they're not calling it a Unimatrix. It's a vessel from Unimatrix, yeah. And it says which Unimatrix it's from. I figured that out.
Yeah, but
I kept thinking they were saying.
I want to say if it's Star Trek Armada 3, which is a mod for Sins of a Solar Empire Rebellion. I don't know. Have we posted anything on that yet? Because we should have by now.
No, we haven't done anything for that one yet.
Okay, well, we'll probably post something on that before too much longer. The Borg's dreadnought in that one is a progenitor, which is literally the ship that V'ger is on in the motion picture.
But I think it's smaller.
No, it's monstrous.
I think it's actually smaller than the one that V'ger was on. I think V'ger was just around long enough that it kept expanding itself.
Yeah, I'll actually have to show you. There's actually a size comparison video on YouTube of showing actually how big the V'ger cloud is.
Yeah,
it was astonishing.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of get an idea when they show the tactical screen, and you see the tiny little Enterprise approaching this massive sphere of a cloud.
Yeah, I want to say the thing's like 120 million kilometers in just length.
Yeah, it was massive.
Like, there's actually an image of it, like, I can't remember what they put it next to. I want to say it was like the Ark from Halo.
Oh, God.
And it's like 3 times the size or something like that. I mean, it was huge.
That's my thing. I think the progenitor that V'ger was on
was a lot
just kept expanding, because you got to remember, it made that trip back. It didn't transwarp back. It made the trip back.
Well, it also made the trip there without transwarp either. So it would have probably picked some stuff up on the way in.
Yeah, that's my point. I think it's bigger because of that. But anyways, moving on to the last thing I wanted to touch on, motion picture happens, we want to say about roughly 5 years after the original series.
At
5
most.
years after
I would say
their 5-year mission.
I would say at most.
So Kirk's still relatively young. He's about 40 in this one. Wrath of Khan, my absolute favorite, arguably the best
Star Trek movie.
Because everybody, when Wrath of Khan came out, everybody was afraid of it. Everybody was like, "Oh God!"
Funny enough, fun fact for Wrath of Khan: the whole scene where they're pulling up to the Enterprise to do the inspection and all that. Most of that film footage was actually pulled directly from the motion picture and just sped up a little bit.
In fact, if you go back and watch motion picture and then watch Wrath of Khan, when they're pulling out of space dock, it's the recycled scene of the guy with jumping and doing a backflip in joy at the launch of Enterprise.
Yeah, there's a lot of similar scenes. They pulled a lot from the motion picture for footage.
Motion picture, let me say this. This is the final note on motion picture. Motion picture sucked, but it served an amazing purpose. It set so much up. Like the Klingons, which, again, we will touch back on in later podcasts. But it set so much up.
That and Next Generation's theme song. The opening for Next Generation, that was the opening for motion picture.
It was the exact same. But
so motion picture sucked, but it set up literally all the like the after stuff, like all the Klingons, what they look like, their battle song, the Next Generation theme song.
Everything.
It really set everything up, including the Borg.
Which makes us giddy because that's our absolute favorite.
Without a doubt.
But, so, Wrath of Khan takes place 10 years later, at least, because Wrath of Khan is 15 years after the episode Space Seed. Give you a backstory. Space Seed, for those of you that haven't seen the original series, Enterprise discovers a ship called the SS Botany Bay, launched in 1996. This was back when they thought that by the 90s we would have what was called a eugenics war, which was basically superhuman beings fighting to take over the world, which they eventually succeeded, but everybody uprose and threw them over, and they all launched in the Botany Bay, which, for those of you that know your history, the Botany Bay is the original penal colony that created what we now know as Australia. That's right, Australia's criminals. How does that make you feel?
No wonder why they party so hard down there.
So, Wrath of Khan took place 15 years after. The whole thing was Khan started off as a decent guy, but they figured out he was a warlord. And then
he tried to take the Enterprise.
Yeah, he tried to take the Enterprise and kill everybody on board. And then was going to go and try to do again what he did 200-300 years ago.
And was stopped by one of the crewmen on the ship that actually later became Khan's wife.
Yeah. She was an anthropologist, and him being from the 20th century, she was so fascinated and so infatuated with him, she fell in love with him, and eventually started helping him. She helps Kirk get out of being killed by a compression chamber in sickbay. Kirk overthrows Khan again, and they are sent to a planet called Ceti Alpha 5.
Yes.
Where
I was having to go through I was going through the movie in my head to make sure we didn't say the wrong one. It is Ceti Alpha 5. Keep wanting to say Ceti Alpha 6, but it's not. It's Ceti Alpha 5.
Ceti Alpha 5 was the closest habitable planet. Nobody else who lived on it, nothing. And it was enough for that crew of 70 to go down and create their own world and do their own thing. Which Khan was okay with. Khan was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. I don't care. I'll conquer this world, and then I'll make my way out. But
so Wrath of Khan happens, and it starts off, I want to say, with the Kobayashi Maru test.
Yes, starts off with the first time you ever see the Kobayashi Maru, which is a no-win scenario designed by Spock. And this is to test and see your mettle as a captain, how you handle looking death right in the face, how you handle pressure.
And next to Kirk, who of course cheated in order to win, which is brought up later, Scotty is actually the one who holds the record for most kills in the Kobayashi Maru.
Yes, he destroyed, we want to say, about
27.
30 Klingon.
It was 27, I remember.
It was 27? 27 Klingon D7 battle cruisers.
With a single ship.
Don't know, the D7 was the best Klingon ship out there.
And if you want more on the Klingon D7 and just how overpowered it really was, go watch either the prelude to Axanar, and they can pretty much explain to you how badass the D7 was supposed to be.
Which, by the way, hashtag I stand with Axanar.
Hashtag we stand with Axanar, because I am so looking forward to that.
Yeah, that side note, they're fighting, they're making a good effort, and they might have Axanar back up.
I am so looking forward to that too.
But back to it. So the whole thing starts off the Kobayashi Maru. You kind of see the Kobayashi Maru, and you realize it's a no-win scenario. They're screwed, to put it blatantly.
And Spock is now the captain of the Enterprise, and the Enterprise is being used as a training vessel, I believe. It
got a new crew. That's what it was.
And they were all cadets, like all trainees and cadets, minus the original crew, like Bones, Spock, Sulu, those guys, because
because remember Bones.
Bones was there.
The Bones, Sulu, Uhura, and
Scotty, Spock, Chekhov.
No, Scotty was actually still a part of the.
That's
Scotty
right.
and Spock were the only ones left.
That's right. Scotty was still chief engineer. That's right.
They didn't want to give anybody else. And he fought to keep the Enterprise because he didn't want anybody screwing with what he had already created.
Yeah, wait until Search for Spock, and we'll get in on that more.
But so another thing is there's an outpost called Regular One, and they're creating what's called the Genesis Wave. The Genesis Wave was essentially like the biblical reference, create life from lifelessness.
They would fire it at a small moon. It would completely destroy the moon, a sense at the atomic level.
A dead planet, anything.
And it would completely rewrite all the atomic, down to the atomic level. It would rewrite the entire planet's atomic chemistry, essentially, and create a new habitable planet.
Yes.
And then it would make plant life, water, things like that at an incredibly accelerated rate. I believe actually at one point it was Bones actually did the analogy of, well, God made the universe in 6 days. Well, but we do it in 6 minutes.
Yeah, the line was, according to ancient myth, Earth was created in 6 days. But look out! Here comes Genesis. We'll do it for you in 6 minutes. And he also pointed out a good point. It would be devastating if it's used on a living planet.
It would destroy the entire planet.
It would destroy. It would it would destroy everything on the planet. Any living thing on the planet would be destroyed and rewritten.
And, well, at this point, the Reliant, the USS Reliant, which was a Miranda-class Federation vessel. Actually,
Again, we'll touch on later.
Chekhov was on that one. God, I'm so losing my mind.
Yeah.
Chekhov was the first officer of the USS Reliant.
The whole mission for the Reliant was to find any dead planets and report back to Regular One.
And they found SETI Alpha.
What they thought was SETI Alpha 6.
It was...
Remember,
because SETI Alpha 5 exploded, so they thought it was SETI Alpha 5.
No.
Right?
Remember, Space Seed, they were dropped off at SETI Alpha 5. 6 months after the Botany Bay crew was dropped off, SETI Alpha 6 exploded.
Yeah. And
it
so
cracked the planet in half.
And it shifted the orbit of SETI Alpha 5, making it completely uninhabitable.
It made it a desert wasteland. There is only...
Minus the nastiest looking ant lions you've ever seen.
Yeah, really and truly, that's what they look like. They look like ant lions. And they are evil. Khan uses, according to him, they're the only indigenous life form left from SETI Alpha 5. Because, again...
And so they go to check out the... Reliant goes to check out the planet. And
because they thought they had a small fluctuation in one of their readings. So they wanted to make sure it wasn't just something, some ambient particle stuck in the matrix. They wanted to make sure it really was a dead planet. It was Chekhov and his captain.
And they found Khan. Khan put creatures in their bodies. And that basically allowed him to...
He dropped...
people more open to suggestion.
Yeah, they crawl in through the ear, disgusting, wrap themselves around the cerebral cortex, making this open to suggestion, which later on, as they grow, it brings along insanity and then death.
As they literally squish your brain against the side of your skull.
Khan uses this to... He straight up says it kills a good number of his crew, including his beloved wife.
Yes. So he's able to take Reliant, and they go to meet the Enterprise after they call into Regular One saying they're going to take the Genesis probe.
They don't succeed in taking Genesis. Carol Marcus, the lead scientist, and her son and 2 other scientists beam down to
the stage
uninhabited.
2.
Yeah. There were 3 stages. There was a lab test, then there was an uninhabitable Turanian
there you go.
scape. So basically interior of anything dead.
And then
and finally the Genesis probe.
Scale.
Yeah. Yes. They had already finished stage 2 and created a Garden of Eden, which is what I think they nicknamed it.
Yeah.
And
let's face it, if you've seen anything remotely related to Star Trek, you know the scene.
So, Khan fails in getting the Genesis probe because along with Carol Marcus and her son and 2 other scientists, they took the material, all the data, and the Genesis probe and launcher itself.
And at this point, before they'd gotten there, Marcus had called into Kirk saying, "Why are you having them take Genesis from us?" So Captain Kirk took their training crew above the Enterprise and had them send out to Regular One, where the Reliant came out to meet him.
He actually contacted Starfleet first to try to see if somebody else could go out, because he said, this is a ship filled with kids. We're not exactly ready to handle any emergency situation. But they were the closest ship, and so there was no other choice. Because of how devastating Genesis could be. Again, we brought up that point. They go on their way to Regular One. They're almost at Regular One, and they come across the Reliant, now captained by Khan.
But they run without their shields down. They run basically. They're basically silent running.
Yes.
And Kurt, of course, being Kurt, does the same thing. He kind of runs trying to contact it, but he also runs shields down until they're essentially right on top of each other. And then Reliant raises their shields and slams
just as a precaution,
they
went to yellow alert and raised defensive shields, so that defends the bridge and a couple other key sections. But it doesn't do much against actual combat. So the deflectors were down, shields were down. All that was up was the safety screens.
And the Reliant pegged them right in the good spots, essentially. They hit them in the auxiliary power.
Right along auxiliary and engineering.
And so when the Reliant pulls away, the Enterprise is completely crippled, minus the batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, do we have any weapons or anything? And Scotty says, all I can give you is like 3 or 4 shots.
That's not going to be enough against their shields.
Long story
short,
Khan calls in. They have their whole little Khan scene.
Yeah.
And they pull off a maneuver that allows them to commandeer the Reliance console, telling them to lower their shields.
Runs off of a combination. That way it prevents people from enemies from hacking into the ships and controlling them. The Starfleet, since Kirk is an admiral, he can pull up all of those command codes.
Which he does. They commandeer the Reliance shield's ability, tell it to lower its shields, and they fire their 3 or 4 shots, and just happen to hit something rather vital. They hit deflector and photon control.
Yes. And it knocked out the phasers.
For a time, yeah.
Yeah.
And so Reliant drew back to Regula 1 to continue looking for the Genesis device while the Enterprise tried to limp its way over there. And I mean limp its way over there.
They beamed down to Regula 1. They discover that all of the remaining scientists are dead.
They find Chekhov and the Reliant captain. And then, of course, they find out that they probably went to the planet and they beamed down there. There's the whole scene with God.
Yeah, they use a coded message, make hours seem like days and days seem like months, which is all an exaggeration.
And so the Enterprise is repairing itself, unbeknownst to Khan, on the other side of the planet. So,
well, Khan knows that
he knows the Enterprise is repairing itself, but he doesn't know where it's at. He thought they were still at Regula 1 because they couldn't move.
And
Meanwhile, she's hiding on the complete other side of the planet.
It's been 2 hours, and Kirk contacts Spock and says, "Are you ready yet?" "Yeah, we're done."
That's also, right before that, the scene was the whole thing when Savick asked him what he did on the Kobayashi Maru test, and he goes, "I cheated."
Well, no, he said, "Well, I had a very innovative and original idea."
Guy actually got accommodations for it too.
And McCoy sat there and said, "Lady, you're looking at the only man to have ever beaten the Kobayashi Maru."
And it's because he cheated. He made it so that there was a winnable scenario.
He said something, I don't remember off the top of my head. And David, his son, sits there and says, "He cheated."
Yep.
And Savick's like, "What?" He said, and Kirk said, "I don't believe in a no-win scenario.
I don't like to lose."
And then he calls Spock and says, "Are you ready?"
And then it catches everybody off guard. He goes, "What can I say? I don't like to lose." And then the whole Matar Nebula battle pursues after that.
Yeah.
Where
basically they're both flying blind.
And they can't target each other, and the shields don't work.
And then Sulu ends up piloting the Enterprise right behind the Reliant. And Sulu has to manually aim and fire. They don't have targeting control again. So,
and they straight up blow off one of the Reliant's nacelles.
Khan, in the last move, activates the Genesis probe.
Of course, quoting Moby Dick as he does. There's Moby Dick references all throughout the entire thing. Like Moby Dick is sitting on the shelf of the Botany Bay stuff from whenever they beamed him down to the planet.
Everything
Wrath
that
of
Khan
is
says,
essentially Moby Dick.
Yeah, Wrath of Khan is based off of Moby Dick, which explains why it's a really good movie. That was Wrath of Khan. They had a close call. But Scotty was able to get warp control right as the Genesis probe blew up.
Spock fixed the mains.
Oh, that's right.
Killing himself in the process because of radiation. They have the whole Scotty playing the bagpipes, playing Amazing Grace as they shoot him off onto the Genesis.
I can't believe I've completely skipped over that.
I cannot believe you completely forgot like the most iconic scene.
I apologize to all Star Trek fans everywhere. I am not worthy. I completely skipped over one of the most important and essential key scenes.
That's like the entire reason for the next movie.
Oh my God! Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, so they launch Spock. Spock left his memory and everything in McCoy.
Which is, we're in search for Spock now, in case you're wondering. The Enterprise comes home, beat all to hell.
They launch Spock's body into space. It gets pulled into Genesis. The planet is called Genesis. Genesis's gravity well, and due to gravity flux and everything, it softly lands there.
And because of the rewriting materials, it rewrites Spock back to life somehow.
Yeah.
I don't remember. That whole thing
It regenerates Spock, but it starts him off as a child.
Yeah, David and Savick from the first one, from Wrath of Khan, are on a Oberoth class science vessel, and they go to the Genesis planet to take looks at it.
McCoy's going mad.
Because Spock's in his head.
Yeah. He's
quite
going
literally.
insane.
There's two consciences inside of McCoy's head.
Well...
And so the whole thing is he's trying to get back to McCoy's like going mad, so he's trying to get back to Genesis to go get Spock's body.
They have to... McCoy gets arrested because he's speaking of Genesis, and he's trying to charter a flight to Genesis.
Which is completely illegal.
Yeah, he's overheard by an undercover officer, so he's thrown in jail.
Scotty at this point is actually reassigned to the Excelsior as the main engineer.
It's a brand new class of ship. It's the first of its kind, and it's. And
do get used to the Excelsior because the Excelsior becomes like the main cruiser for the Federation, including into the next gen. Like the Excelsiors are around even to the Dominion.
Search for Spock, essentially in all essence, was they hijack
the Enterprise.
And
Scotty cripples the transwarp capability of the Excelsior. He actually breaks the Excelsior.
He makes it where it can't even go to any kind of warp at all.
He literally breaks the Excelsior, pulling 6 isolinear chips.
Yes, removing 6 isolinear chips. That's all it took, just to knock it out. 6 isolinear chips, and he gives them to McCoy. He says, from one doctor to another.
From one surgeon to another.
Oh, it was so funny.
Which is kind of one reason why later in a DS9 episode called, I believe it was Trials and Tribulations.
Yes.
When they go back in time to the Trouble with Tribbles episode, Chief O'Brien doesn't want to touch any of the Enterprise's components because he's like, I cannot figure out how this thing's work. It's all cross-wired. And
he's afraid if he touches anything, the whole ship will explode.
And it's because Scotty completely rewired the entirety of the Enterprise. Because the Enterprise was Scotty's baby, really. And so when he got reassigned to the Excelsior, he got really irritated. Because the thing is, you couldn't pull 6 isolinear chips out of the main computer for the Enterprise and completely break it. Because he had it so cross-wired and everything that it would not break.
No.
Meanwhile, we're on the Excelsior, he pulls 6 chips and the thing completely falls apart.
It can't go
which
anywhere.
We will get into later on why that's a problem with the Excelsiors.
But, so they commandeer, it's just Uhura.
Uhura was already on Vulcan.
No,
it was Scotty, Bones, Sulu, and Kirk.
That's right, yeah. No, Uhura stayed behind and played off that she had no idea what was going to... She had no idea. Yeah. And the ensign was trapped in a closet.
Yep.
And then she got a shuttle to Vulcan and stayed hidden in Vulcan.
Meanwhile, of course, we have the greatest Klingon ever in Christopher Lloyd.
Yes. The greatest Klingon there's ever been. Even Michael Dorn can't stand up to Christopher Lloyd.
I wanted him to start doing stuff from I forgot the name of the movie. I think it was Taxi or something like that.
Oh God, yes.
I forgot where the hell I was going.
I
would love to see some of the bloopers for Search for Spock because I guarantee you Christopher Lloyd's in so many of them.
But he's the main villain. He's commanding a Brel, which is the brand new class of ship for the Klingons.
Long story short, Search for Spock is the Enterprise goes there.
Gets blown up.
They self-destruct the Enterprise, taking out the entire crew of the Brel with him, minus like 4 Klingons, because there's a couple on the planet. There was like 2 still left, including Christopher Lloyd. They take out the crew along with the Enterprise. They go down.
They're already on Genesis.
David died because he got stabbed.
They kill one of the hostages at random. It was Spock, David, and Savick.
And they killed David, which is Kirk's son.
Yes.
And Savick, so they beam down. They get Savick and Spock before the Enterprise explodes, and then before they beam back up, Christopher Lloyd beams down. They have some little scuffle.
No, Christopher Lloyd was already down there. He was with them.
I don't remember.
Kirk and Christopher Lloyd have a fight, and he gets.
Then they beam back up to the Brel.
Well, Lloyd falls off of a cliff into lava.
Yep. Then they take the Brel and go to Vulcan, and they have the whole scene where they bring Spock's memory out of McCoy and put him back in Spock, and so on and so forth. With the whole Jim, your name is Jim scene.
Yeah, it was a touching, adorable thing. And Kirk is charged with mutiny, and is ordered to report back to Starfleet.
Yep. On their way home, though, this is Voyage Home now. A whale probe shows up.
Yep.
Looking for humpback whales.
It is a massive cylindrical. It's second to the progenitor that V'ger was on. It is massive.
Well, it's not that big. It's actually about the same size as Starfleet Command.
Because
there's actually a scene of the two next to each other.
That was pretty big.
The progenitor was almost the same size as Earth.
So the whole thing was they're looking for they're sending out a specific signal, waiting for a response.
And meanwhile, it's causing all kinds of havoc because it's such a high amp signal.
They figure out Kirk. I don't know how he used.
Spock figures it out.
How they used the logic for it.
Well, no, because it said it was aiming it at the oceans.
Which is
causing all the moisture and everything to stir up because they were aiming at the oceans. He said, so let's hear what it sounds like underwater. Yeah. It sounds like a humpback whale, and they figure that out.
Which was extinct by their time. So
they have to go back in time to go save some humpback whales.
Yeah. In a Brel. They have to do the slingshot method that they did in one of the episodes before. Actually, they used it a couple of times in the original series, the slingshot method.
Yeah, let's face it, Voyage Home may be, like, overall, like most people say, like, Voyage Home's like one of the best original 6 movies. It really serves no purpose in the grand scheme of things.
It really doesn't, but it's touching. It's well written. It really is. It really had no absolute sustaining purpose, other than the fact that they were basically calling out that, hey, we're losing these creatures. Yeah, we're losing these creatures. You might want to do something in case something like this does happen.
Yeah,
but it was just an economical awareness thing going on.
Well, so they get a couple humpback whales, come back in time. I mean, some stuff happens, nothing really that major in the grand scheme of things. And they come back, drop them off, the probe leaves.
But
the coolest part of Voyage Home, in my opinion, is when they demote Kirk from admiral back to captain, so he's given a ship, and then they unveil the Enterprise A.
They're flying to the Excelsior, and they're like, oh.
They're like, oh god. And then they pull up right over the top of the saucer, and you see the Enterprise A.
Yeah.
Which used to be the Orc Town, but they renamed it. But I'll get into that later.
And then God.
5. Do we have to talk about Final Frontier? I really don't want to talk about Final Frontier.
I'm not even going to touch 5. 5 was atrocious. Basically,
there was a Spock's brother started this cult thing where they thought God was at the center of the universe. They went to go see who this guy was. It turns out he's some other being. They have the whole scene with what does God need with a starship?
Evil being. He's trapped in the center of the universe. Okay, passing 5. We're
done with 5.
I can remember motion picture because it served a purpose. 5. Okay, I will say that motion picture is better than 5.
Thank you, because 5 is it's painful just to recollect because it's so bad.
It's painful to watch. After they leave the planet, it's really, really painful to watch.
It's just talking about it's giving me a headache. Let's go to Undiscovered Country.
Well, Undiscovered Country.
That's huge.
This one is arguably between it and First Contact. They tie for second best film out of all of the Star Trek films.
Well, second best. Sorry, I was like, what happened to Wrath of Khan?
No, I said
But in terms of importance, I would say it's second maybe to motion picture. Motion pictures because it set up all the futuristic things for the actual show. Terrible. But in terms of timeline, Undiscovered Country is huge because it kind of ends the conflict between the Klingons and the Federation.
Again, for those of you that didn't watch the original series, Klingons were the biggest enemy of...
Just go watch Prelude to Axanar. That's all you really need to know. And as soon as that comes out, we are totally podcasting the crap out of that.
Oh, yeah. Yes, definitely, because we are excited for that one. But...
Undiscovered Country was actually... Sulu is now the captain of the Excelsior, and they actually are there for when Praxis, which is the main dilithium end source for the Klingon Empire, literally explodes.
Yeah, it's decimated.
So what this means is in the long run is that about 50 years after this event, the Klingon Empire will completely run out of resources to maintain its navy. And basically the Klingon Empire will be crippled.
Yeah.
And so they came to the Federation seeking kind of an alliance with them.
Because nobody could turn to the Romulans because the Romulans hate everybody.
Suck.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that in the race tab later.
But... that was the whole thing. There was a conspiracy to kill the Chancellor and keep the war going.
Strangely enough, and it's from both sides, the Federation and the Klingons.
It's really funny.
It's you're working together to prevent you guys from working together.
It's the Fleet Admiral of Starfleet and the leading general of Klingon Defense Force.
His name is... Oh, God, what was his name?
Chris Palmer.
Chris Palmer, yes, because remember Chris was my roommate.
Yeah,
his name was Chris Palmer.
Yeah,
I actually had a roommate named Chris Palmer.
Jokes.
I kept making so many
and then you had a roommate named
references. Khan. Yeah, and Khan. I had a Khan and a Christopher Palmer. I was making so many Star Trek references, and none of them got it.
But yeah, so Undiscovered Country is just major because it ends the conflict between Starfleet and the Klingon.
I mean, I know I apologize that we're not going into depth into the later ones, but just because, for sake of time, and they really aren't that important.
They really aren't. The only one that's really and truly important is First Contact, and just because it sets up how Warp came to be and how they met the Vulcans. It really sets up for Enterprise, is the whole point to it. Thank you for sticking around with us. This is Hawkeye 1621.
I am Phoenix 13.
And we will see you guys next week.